In our last report, we heard from the members. The two different financial services held the memberships. One was Chase Finance in Utah, and we were told there that memberships would be transferred to other spas or canceled. The Utah Attorney General's office is working on that one. The other financial service was Gary Holliday, the local owner of Spa Lady, who disappeared. Members paying him were uncertain what to do. Most decided not to continue paying Holliday. However, Patty Roper informed me she had received a letter from the Nautilus Fitness Center in Edmond saying they had bought the contracts from Spa Lady. She called them.
They said that they were doing it as a good favor, you know, that they wouldn't be making any money, that they had enough overhead from the other people that had joined them, and that they didn't need the money, that they were just doing it for all the women that had joined Lady Spa so that they could, you know, come and have somewhere to work out.
Did they say who they bought these contracts from?
No. They just said they had come in contact with somebody and were able to buy the contracts.
Because the letter indicated that contracts had been purchased from Spa Lady, we assumed its owner, Gary Holliday, might still be in town. Well, I talked with Nautilus manager John Ragland. Well, it turns out that while members of the now-defunct Spa Lady were searching for the disappearing owner, Gary Holliday, Ragland was buying up Spa Lady memberships from Holliday. Ragland said, in fact, he bought about $27,000 worth for only $200. Apparently, Holliday needed the money for a plane ticket to Florida. Well, Ragland told us he hoped to get some of the members from Spa Lady to transfer to his spa here in Edmond. However, he said he would not actively try to collect on those contracts from ladies who did not transfer and still owe money to the now-defunct Spa Lady. You may recall we visited the Bethany Village Healthcare Center with Miss Orpha Jones' daughter and granddaughter. We were asked to leave, then called back to interview Administrator Gene Curtis, who claimed Miss Jones and several other patients were disturbing the others.
We've had a number of people who have been complaining. They have not been able to sleep at night, nor even rest in the afternoon. And I've had people here in my office about 2 weeks ago, and they heard this, and they said that they were considering bringing their aunt down, and they said under no circumstances could they have that.
Following that, we learned that Bethany Village is on probation. State health officials said many deficiencies were found earlier this year. However, the State Board of Nursing Homes called in the home administrator for a discussion, then reported that satisfactory progress was being made in correcting those problems. Ed Egan, a male nurse and former evening supervisor, commented.
Mrs. Curtis said that if it hadn't been for her and her association with the board and being among the first board members, you know, appointed by the governor, that the institution would have been closed because they had 64 deficiencies. That's an awful lot of deficiencies. This covered anything from the kitchen to housekeeping to the patient's charts, medication sheets. I saw a partial list of the deficiencies, and there was quite a number of them.
Bethany Administrator Gene Kerr said Ed was fired because he was incompetent, didn't show up for work, and abused patients and other employees. Ed says he was fired for questioning practices of the home. One of them was keeping the medical records of Miss Orpha Jones away from the family.
Because it took the chart and locked it up in the medication room to make sure that the Bachmans didn't get a hold of it. And also the doctor did authorize Mrs. Bachman to have a copy of the physical examination, you know, to give to Mrs. Bachman. She asked for it. So the doctor did give the authority for her to have information to Mrs. Jones's health record.
And did they turn it over to her?
I did give it to her, and I did chart such that the doctor did order this, and it was in the nursing notes. And I reported this to my superiors and told them this is what I'd done. And then I think that's when I began to sense I was in real trouble, you know, as far as my job went, that I was not going along, you know, with the thinking of the administration.
Ed says Miss Jones shouldn't have been evicted for yelling. He said she spoke loudly because she was hard of hearing, which is common. He felt she and several others were being evicted because their medical conditions required more attention than the other patients. I asked State Representative Don McCorkle about evicting patients for yelling.
I don't see any way in the world that yelling or making noise or something like that would in any way come within a valid reasoning under the Act for discharge.
Representative McCorkle wrote the Bill of Rights for nursing home patients. It's been in effect for 1 year now, and it legislates stronger treatment of nursing home violations.
We were very careful about putting this in the Act. That is, if the health department fails to do its duty, there is the right of access to the district courts of this state on behalf of patients, and frankly there is the potential of involvement of the district attorneys of this state or the attorney general in regard to certain criminal violations, because we do make a violation of the patient's rights a misdemeanor, and there are some other circumstances where that is the case in the Act, and the DA or the attorney general or a combination of the two could become involved on that basis. So
Bill West had plans for this patch of land outside of Piedmont. He had a trailer home set up for his son and daughter-in-law. The problem was getting them some water. Well, he hired a water witcher to locate water on the land. Then he called Ted Jenks Waterwell Drilling to make the hole. The hole was dug, but Bill West says it was no good.
Well, the well's not straight up and down.
And what's that do?
There's no way you can use it for a pump. You can't put a... It's not good for an electric pump, and really, you can't use it at all with a windmill. He come back out, and I wanted him to drill another well and drill it straight up and down, and I'd pay him. He said, no, there wasn't no way you're going to drill another well.
West claimed the hole was too crooked for a water pump and definitely too crooked for a windmill pump that he wanted to add on later, so he refused to pay the bill. I took a random survey of 5 water well drillers. They said all water wells are a little bit crooked. All said if water is found, most drillers will do what is necessary at no extra cost to make the well usable. All commented that water is difficult to find in the Piedmont area. And the issue, they say, is the amount of water in the well. I talked with Ted Jenks of Edmond, who had the well drilled for Bill West. He and the driller both say the low volume of water found in the hole is the issue here.
At 14 feet, I believe it was, we hit about a gallon a minute. And so we drilled on down to 80 and got nothing else. And
So is a gallon a minute enough to...
a gallon a minute is really not enough.
We got down 80 feet, and I informed it we still had just the less than a gallon a minute. That I didn't think it'd be any need going in deeper. He said okay, didn't want to case it. They didn't want to use anything less than 5 gallons a minute.
Of course, later on I took them a bill out, and they refused to take the bill, said that they wasn't going to pay for it because it was crooked. And I said, well, you don't have any water, and you didn't intend to case the well. So if we had cased the well, we'd have made sure that the well was in fit shape to case up. And casing would have went in the well.
Jenks and other drillers I talked with agreed that a gallon per minute from a well is not sufficient for a home. Both Jenks and the driller feel if there was enough water, Bill West would have used the well. Jenks said his father was a water well driller before him, and he says his father told him if there's water in the hole, it's the customer's well. If it's a dry hole, it becomes the driller's well. The The caller, Charlie White, said 35-year-old veteran Gary Davidson claimed to have planted a bomb under his house and wanted to kill himself. He said he couldn't get any help for his drug and alcohol problems, which began while serving in Vietnam. He was a river patrol boat gunner back in 1967. Now he was suffering from his addiction to drugs and from flashbacks, but he finally admitted there was no bomb. The caller, Charlie White, said 35-year-old veteran Gary Davidson claimed to have planted a bomb under his house and wanted to kill himself. He said he couldn't get any help for his drug and alcohol problems, which began while serving in Vietnam. He was a river patrol boat gunner back in 1967. Now he was suffering from his addiction to drugs and from flashbacks, but he finally admitted there was no bomb.
There isn't any bomb under the house, is there, Gary?
Tell the truth, Gary.
I'm not going to leave if there is or if there isn't.
Well, it don't make any difference. No, I was going to go down. I was going to blow myself up.
Gary said he couldn't get into the VA rehabilitation program despite his VA hospital priority card. He said he had gone to Central State Hospital in Norman to dry out, but couldn't take the treatment after 4 days there.
I ain't going to Norman. No,
Right.
You shoot me right out there. I'll walk out there. Charlie,
called.
you call a SWAT team. I'll walk out there and they shoot me. I ain't going to Norman. No way. No way.
All right.
I don't deserve that.
What is it that you need?
I need medical help. I'm a drug addict, and I'm a alcoholic.
Well, let's be frank. What kind of drugs are you on that you need to be rehabilitated from?
I've been on speed. I've been on Tylenol 3s. Same thing. I've been on Valium. I've been on Valium since I come out of 9 to 67. And I just can't believe people's treating me that way.
Police had been alerted by our news director and another caller. They came suspecting a hostage situation and a bomb threat and took Gary out for questioning.
Charlie, you said you wouldn't let them take me to jail.
They are going to take you to jail, Gary. They're going to take you to the hospital.
That's not right.
Slow down.
I serve my country.
We explained what we found to the police, that no gun or hostages were found, and that he admitted no bomb was planted under the house.
Right now, we just want to get him under control so he won't cause any harm to himself or anybody in the neighborhood. Did he ever state to you that you were a hostage? Never did, huh? Okay.
The officers said they had no record against Gary and would not take him to jail. They said they could put him in the detox center for drunks, but instead would escort him to the Veterans Hospital where we hoped he could be helped. While waiting to find out if Gary would be admitted, we talked with his brother Tim, who said Gary had been in a VA rehabilitation program but pulled out by his father, and since then had tried to get readmitted with no luck. Tim said Gary's problem stemmed from a wound received in Vietnam.
He was in the hospital for 2 years when he come back from Vietnam, and I feel like that's where it started from. But he's been trying to get help lately, and everywhere he tries to get in, he can't get in, and he's getting impatient, and I felt like this deal today was just the last straw. I felt like if he hadn't got the help today from y'all as far as getting into the hospital, he'd probably went out and done something. Probably tried to take his life.
Jim Owens on North Francis called to say the water leak in front of his house just changed into a geyser. He said he'd been seeking help from the water company for some time with no results. How long have you had the problem out here?
Almost 2 years. Since I moved in, it was reported when I moved in, Brad.
And what did you do about it?
It was reported at the time I moved in and several subsequent times, and I kept getting promises that we'll come out and take a look at it. Finally, somebody came out and took a look at it. They said it was a serious leak, and nothing ever happened after that.
What kind of problems has this caused you since you moved in this neighborhood?
Well, we've had ice in the winter. It's iced over. It's a slippery entrance and exit, and it's unsightly, as you see, and it's just not been a good situation.
As luck would have it, just before we arrived, a water company serviceman happened by.
I was around the corner. I had a call around the corner. and that was an emergency call. So I went there first because I'd been given that call. And then I saw this, and I decided to come up here and look at it, see what it was. I thought it might have been somebody pumping a pool out.
Giles said he would have a nearby crew come by and make repairs as quickly as possible. So maybe Jim Owens won't slide out of his driveway this winter, and hopefully his water bills will be a little more reasonable. However, no water company official just happened by this intersection, Northwest 27th and Military. Water's been leaking out of the cracks at this intersection for over a month now. Marilyn Moore has called the water department, but no repairs have been made as yet. Marilyn started calling the water company a month ago. She said someone came by and looked at the seeping water but never returned. At that time, water was coming up around the manhole. Since that time, water began spouting from cracks in the street, which worries Marilyn.
Well, we have a bad problem with traffic anyway. We have yield signs here, and since this is right in the middle of our intersection, there's a lot of water going, and people slide. They're very careless about this anyway. But this morning it was even worse because it froze last night. There's this thin layer of ice and cars, you can hear them screeching out here when they hit brakes, trying to keep from hitting. This is a children area too, and they slide right on through. Yep. And it's been like this for like a month, and it's getting to be a bad situation.
She says a plumber told her if it gets any worse, parts of the street could cave in. Marilyn says in addition to the danger, a water-filled street won't enhance her chance at selling her home. She's decided to move to the country. Ken and Gail Baker found a nice home for themselves outside of Chandler. They like it so much, they are leasing the property with an option to buy it. There's just one hitch, an open oil well in the front yard, and it belongs to somebody else.
If it was cleaned up around here and fenced a little bit, the well don't bother me that much, but the kids have been playing out here, dogs got hurt already, and I'm very disappointed in the people I've talked to.
Ken and Gail have 2 young children and 1 on the way. They'd like to raise them here in the country, but not with an open oil well pumping up and down, and not with an open oil tank with steps leading right up to the edge. Because there's no fence, anybody can walk up these steps right up to the top of this oil tank.
In fact, the oldest one, I've told him twice now and kicked his little hiney for it the last time, but caught him up on top where there's a perfect stairway, but not a ladder, but it's a staircase that goes right up to it, and the one tank doesn't have a top, and I don't know if I'll catch him up there again after this last time, but the boy, he rides his little pony, and he comes around the other side, and well, when you see him from the house, it looks like he's right in the well, and he just gets attracted with the animals and stuff, and you just can't watch him.
The Bakers say one of their dogs has already fallen victim to the well. While playing around the pump, it was hit in the back, something they fear could happen to the children.
Well, for an example, oil man that eats in my restaurant, he told me about his daughter getting up on one and riding it like a rocking horse. And she got her leg crushed, and he says he buys corrective shoes for her now. Her leg's shorter than the other, and it just caused quite a problem.
As if to illustrate the problem, while we were talking, one of the Baker's dogs wandered onto the pad of the well and was almost hit, but Ken was able to call him away from the pump. Ken says the well was recently sold to Neil Culp in Cushing. When he contacted him, Ken says Culp suggested fencing in the yard to keep the kids and dogs away from the oil well. But the Bakers are hesitant to build fence on property they are just leasing, and they moved to the country anyway to avoid being fenced in. I visited Neil Culp in Cushing to see what he could do. Culp said he was working on a fence.
Like I say, it's just happened. We've got it out here in the shop partially built and just don't have it down there installed yet. But like I say, we didn't know about this until last week. We're going to build a fence around it and keep them from falling into it and snagging him. But 12, 13-year-old boy can get over a lot of fences if he wants to.
Just about anything you
right.
name.
Yeah. And so I don't know whether there's such a thing as making it child-proof or not.
Yeah.
Brewer of Piedmont feels like he's being ganged up on. The city laid a water pipeline across his driveway. Then the rains came. That's when Faber noticed some problems. I visited the brewer's house on a rainy day to have a look.
He comes along and puts this water line in.
Yeah.
And with the understanding that it would go back exactly as he found it. Be filled in and be packed and to be sifted gravel put back in there.
Mm-hmm.
So far it has not been done.
Did they tell you they would come back and do it?
Yes, they told me they would, that it would be put back as they had found it. Now it seems as though they're dragging their feet and reluctant to even come back and do anything about it.
Faber says instead of putting gravel back on his driveway, they put sand, and that began to sink after the first rain. The second problem Faber attributes to the county. They came through to scrape and improve the road that passes in front of the brewer's house, and what happened?
The culvert has been driven into, apparently by the blade of the grader on one end of it, and it looks like he drove off the other end of it with the tractor. Tractor grader, all that, which is a big 6-wheel job.
Mm-hmm.
And water is standing out here in front and has stood out here in front, which is detrimental to the sale of the place, should I want to sell it, as well as a health standard.
Well, it cost Faber $350 to put that culvert in 3 years ago. He doesn't want to have to pay it again. I took his complaints to the county commissioner's office in El Reno. Sandra Cole is the acting county commissioner, appointed by the governor after resignations in the county commissioner corruption scandal. Mrs. Cole said she had to set priorities when she came into the new position.
And I do sympathize with Mr. Brewer, but I did have to place his problem lower in priorities than he chose, but I found it necessary to do this. And then it's more than just replacing a culvert. Mr. Brewer has requested that the drainage be changed from north to south to north. Well, in order to do that, we would have to get the person's permission for a half-mile area, deepen the ditch from 1 to 2 feet, have the water lines and all the utility lines removed, and then literally change the water flow 1/2 mile. And that's a considerable job. And we just do not have the men and the equipment to do that at this point.
So it's on the list, it's just going to be a while before.
Yes, it will.
Kathy Hamlin and her husband borrowed $750 to have new carpet installed. They saw an ad in the green sheet advertising circular that looked reasonable. Kathy says carpet contractor Ralph Weeks Toady took their money but never finished the job. And what he did has already come loose. Worse yet, she says he brought in used padding with mice in it.
So he went ahead and he laid the carpets in the bedroom, and then when he left, there was another one in the dining room, a baby one.
Kathy's mother also hired Ralph Toady at about the same time. Pam Lemon claims she never got the exact carpet she ordered, but let him start the job so she wouldn't lose her $1,500 down payment. But she, too, couldn't get him to finish the job.
He said, the point is you don't even plan to lay our carpet, do you? Finish it. And he said, I don't know if I will or not. And anyway, they got talking about I said, well, I'll tell you what somebody ought to do. My husband said, what someone ought to do to you is just beat your head in. You know, you get by with that stuff all the time. So he said, well, I'm smarter than you are. He said, I got your $1,500, didn't I?
Ralph Weeks Toady has quite a file at the Better Business Bureau in Oklahoma City. They have records on him dating back to 1955. His file shows 56 complaints against him, and only 19 of them have ever been answered. The Better Business Bureau says now Toady refuses their mail. Well, his record also shows 7 different names for his company, among them Aero Carpets, C&A Carpets, Chief Carpet Service Company, Carpets of Oklahoma City, and Northeast Carpets. Twitty says he has no confidence in the Better Business Bureau, that somebody is always complaining.
And so he said, well, you didn't do my closets. And he said, no, and I don't plan on doing them. And he said, I don't plan on finishing your job.
Ralph Weeks Twitty lives here at 1129 Twilight Drive in Midwest City. He refused an interview on camera and for unknown reasons threatened to call police if we came by his house again to ask him about complaints. Well, after consulting his attorney, Mr. Twitty agreed to a telephone interview to answer the complaints against him. Twitty contends that in the case of Kathy Hamlin, he told her he was buying carpet remnants for her house and that they might not match. He says they agreed to that. Well, the Hamlins deny it, and remnants is not mentioned anywhere in their contract. He said he did not finish the Hamlins' job because they started doing the carpeting themselves, so he refused to come back. Well, the Hamlins say Mr. Twitty just refused to finish the job. They got an estimate from another carpet company to finish the job and make repairs on the work that Twitty had already done. The estimate, $700. Kathy says the first room he did looked good, so her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Lemon, hired Twitty to carpet their home before difficulties arose at her daughter's house.
He had some carpet, and it was not the carpet that I chose out of his sample that he was carrying. And so I had a piece of carpet here like I wanted. And so he said, let me take it and I'll see if I can find you the carpet. But this, my husband had looked out in the barn first, and he refused that carpet. It was torn up on the end, and so Mr. Talhote said that it had fell out of his truck while it was in this condition. So he goes down and he says, I'll get some more and I'll bring out here and get your approval. So when I seen the carpet, he was already upstairs with it spread out. And I didn't give my approval either way. I just finally decided if I was going to get anything at all, I better accept it and shut up.
Mrs. Lemon says she figured she better let Twitty put in the carpeting he had, or she would end up losing the $1,500 she paid him down. But once again, there was trouble. When she swept the carpeting, it came loose from the floor at the seams and edges. Plus, she said he damaged a poster bed and sink top.
He went upstairs and did the same thing, messed up another bed, scratched it all up, and the guy that worked for him laid all of his tools, or him one, up on the marble vanity in the bathroom and scratched it all up. Well, the estimate for that was $400 and something. They rent that marble top.
Twitty says he fixed the poster bed himself, but knew nothing about the sink top. Once again, the Lemons could not get Twitty to come out and finish the job, and they became angry.
My husband called him again, and my husband was mad. And he asked him, he said, what I want to know, Ralph, is when you plan on laying our carpet. Would you answer me that? And evidently, Ralph said Wednesday. Weldon said Wednesday this week or Wednesday a year from now. He said, the point is you don't even plan to lay our carpet, do you? Finish it. And he said, I don't know if I will or not. And anyway, they got talking about Weldon said, well, I'll tell you what somebody ought to do. My husband said, what someone ought to do to you is just beat your head in. You know, you get by with that stuff all the time. So he said, well, I'm smarter than you are. He said, I got your $1,500, didn't I?
Mr. Twitty claims he didn't finish the job because they owed him more money. Meanwhile, the Lemons say they are tired of waiting and unsatisfied with the job, so they've also hired another company to clean it up and finish it. Ralph Weeks Twitty has quite a file at the Better Business Bureau in Oklahoma City. They have records on him dating back to 1955. His file shows 56 complaints against him, and only 19 of them have ever been answered. The Better Business Bureau says now Twitty refuses their mail. Well, his record also shows 7 different names for his company, among them Aero Carpets, C&A Carpets, Chief Carpet Service Company, Carpets of Oklahoma City, and Northeast Carpets. Twitty says he has no confidence in the Better Business Bureau, that somebody is always complaining. By telephone, Twitty told me he would call the Lemons and the Hamlins to see what he could do to satisfy them.